Tashitele Rinpoche, Tashitele Dosi Rinpoche. Good morning.
Rinpoche les dice casi dile que todos los que están conectados al video.
Rinpoche says Tashitele to everyone on the live stream.
We'll begin with the opening prayers in the yellow prayer book on page 1.
Empezamos con las plegarias de inicio en el libro del Garchen Institute. Página 1.
All mother sentient beings, limitless as space, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be free from suffering, and swiftly may they attain precious, unsurpassed, perfectly complete enlightenment. All mother sentient beings, limitless as space, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be free from suffering, and swiftly may they attain precious, unsurpassed, perfectly complete enlightenment. For that purpose, until I attain Buddhahood, I will apply my
Ahora
body.
vamos a hacer la ofrenda de Mandala en la
I will apply
página
my
7.
body, speech, and mind to virtue. From today until this time tomorrow, I will apply my body, speech, and mind to virtue. Now we'll do the Mandala offering on page 7. An infinite array of worlds, each with 4 continents and the wealth of infinite oceans of realms, If I bring them all to mind and offer them without exception, please hold with compassion all the beings they contain. My body, enjoyments, and whatever I own, my aggregates, elements, and sense sources, my aspirations now and in times to come, as well as everything I grasp as mine, by offering them all, may I be blessed with the end of self-grasping, completely liberated from the bounds of real and unreal, transcending the names and concepts of arising, cessation, and abiding, coming and going, affirmation and denial. The supreme mandala is the natural state. By offering it, may I be blessed to attain the state of Buddhahood.
Om Guru Deva Draken Dena Mandala Patijazoa Sem Janam Dia Sambata Loya Sara Jadarva Che Jong Tumon Tebaye Chujian Kolo Gordu So.
Requesting teachings on page 10. Please turn the wheel of the Dharma of the greater and lesser vehicles and the teachings common to both according to the dispositions and mental capacities of sentient beings.
산지 집어도 생리 생리 야들이 그 건상분 뭐는 이제 남님 되는 성을 대탑지 소디네 너한테 저들은 생그 내lok도 될 산지 딱그 요래 이용 말이 될 산지 뒤송게 뭔가 소를 천도고 요래 삼아 석진이 적진이 되라서 뭔가 소를 뭐 소를 탑라들이 첨보 섬지 말을 또 저도 샘데 내록 되는 판마와래 들이 내록 되더니 맹석사 요래는 드리스다 당분적인 성공을 성내더니 다다 그 시선 파데 내록에서 호대기 취탐제 라시 내록에 템바레 그리들 산지 좀 뒤에 그냥 성내더니 통원이 공부 상대가 그래서 잡체 그대 우산데 마세에서 생명이 대성 체취되도록 성노래 그때 개바 탐제 되는 데니 까대로 용서 저거 되는 데니 성노래가 통사 발성때 상지간을 사빠 시와데 다시 왔지 그래리 제 생각을 이제 시와래 시와들이 세배 남카 잡소 되는데 말아래배 남카다고 공주지 잡도다고 공주시 있어 내로 떠올리는 저 대사 배려로 쏜 거예요. 되는들이 다 되는 그래도 뒤에들이 그래 거라고
Buenas tardes a todos. Gracias por venir a las enseñanzas de Garchen Rinpoche. Vamos a esperar a que traduzca Ina y después yo traduzco al español. Gracias.
So today, Dharma friends, I'm going to give a brief introduction on Shamatha and calm abiding. And so now generally, what is Shamatha? So in the lineage of the practice lineage of blessings, in the tantric lineage, the nature of the mind is given many different names. For example, it is referred to as Dzogchen or Mahamudra and so on. Logic Din Sumgen said in the Gongchik, in the very beginning, it said the Buddha only showed the fundamental nature of all phenomena. So that is really the essence of the teachings. So what that refers to is really the nature of the mind. So it is all speaking about the nature of the mind, the fundamental nature of reality and so on. And so Chamgyeng Kongtrul also had said, I have not recognized that my own mind is Buddha. And then also, who said that first, that one's own mind is Buddha? It was the Buddha himself who said, all sentient beings are actually Buddhas. And so then if one just hears that and looks around, one may think that, how can this be? And it's hard to believe because we see all these suffering sentient beings, like the humans and the animals and so on. Who can really be certain that they are actually Buddhas? And then also Jigden Somgan had said, karma, cause and effect, is the natural manifestation of the moment-to-moment thoughts. And the Buddha had said, all beings are actually Buddhas, however, they are obscured by adventitious stains. And so that adventitious stain is the clinging to an I, the clinging to a self. And that is what temporarily has caused the mind to freeze into like an ice block, like water freezing into an ice block. And temporarily, as a result, the 6 kinds of sentient beings all appear separately. And so if one doesn't realize the nature of one's mind, one can not become liberated from this state of samsaric existence. And so the nature of the mind is just like a vast ocean. And that is what we call Buddha nature. It's the natural state of the mind is our Buddha nature. And all sentient beings possess that nature. And that nature is like water. But water appears in many different ways. For example, some beings are like ice blocks, and some are like ocean water or like lake water and so on. Water appears, or like tap water and all of that. Water appears in all kinds of different forms. But what is the root of all of that? In the 37 practices, it says, all suffering without exception comes from wishing for one's own happiness. So this adventitious obscuration that the Buddha spoke of is the fixation, the grasping at an I, at a self. So this thought of me always arises in the mind. And if you don't recognize this thought of I, this me, you can never become liberated. So recognizing it is just like understanding that the nature of ice is actually water. So when you recognize that, you know that actually ice is just a temporary state. It's adventitious. And now when you recognize the nature of water, this is like seeing the nature of the mind. And then wherever you go in the 6 realms of samsara, all these endless sentient beings, they all have that same mind. And nobody has a different mind. It's one and the same. And then you begin to understand the Buddha's teaching when he said all beings are actually Buddhas. And you see that that is because Buddha pervades all minds, all sentient beings' minds. So whoever has a mind has this nature. Also in the Samantabhadra prayer it says, there is a single ground, yet 2 paths and 2 fruitions. Actually everything is included within that. So when you realize the nature of the mind, that is what we call a Buddha, and really nothing else. Also Chikden Sumgön has said, people are confused, gone astray by grasping at 3 names, which is Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and the Madhyamaka middle way. And so then in his quote in the Gongchik, he said that the ultimate nature is free, is untouched, remains untouched by the 3 great ones, which are those 3, Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and Madhyamaka. And so this is how he had ascertained the true nature of the mind. It cannot really be given any name. But so then temporarily it is called many different names. And also, so that leads back to the first quote by Chikden Sumgön in the Gongchik, that the Buddha had only taught the fundamental nature of all things. That's all the Buddha said. And so what it all comes down to is to realize the natural state of the mind. And so when the Buddha himself, when he attained enlightenment, he actually, upon attaining enlightenment, he instantly expressed the nature of the mind by saying the nature of the mind is profound, and it is peaceful, it is free from elaboration, and it is luminous. And the great scholars can elaborate on that extensively. There is so much you can speak on just those 4 terms of how the Buddha described the nature of the mind. And so it is profound and peaceful. So peaceful, the nature of the mind, the natural state of the mind is peaceful. And another example is like space or like an ocean. Therefore Milarepa also said you should meditate on your mind like an ocean or like the sky. And so this is how you realize the mind when you actually see its nature, like space, like the sky, or like an ocean. And so this is what I'm going to introduce you to today briefly. So today I will speak briefly on the nature of Shamatha, or calm abiding.
Bueno, hoy voy a dar una breve introducción al Shamata. En el linaje de las bendiciones se le refiere como Dzogchen o Mahamudra. Se le dan muchas definiciones. En el principio, el Buda solo dio los fundamentos de la naturaleza de la realidad y la mente. Jamjon Kongtrul dice, no he reconocido que mi mente es el Buda. Todos los seres sintientes son Budas. Uno puede pensar que esto es difícil, ya que uno voltea y ve todo el sufrimiento de los seres de los 6 reinos. Pero Chikden Sumgön también dijo, el karma, la acción y el efecto es el resultado de los pensamientos momento a momento. El apegarse a un yo es lo que causa que la mente se congele como el agua en un bloque de hielo. Por eso aparecen los 6 tipos de seres. La naturaleza de la mente es como un océano vasto. Esto es nuestra naturaleza búdica. El agua aparece de muchas maneras. Algunos seres son como bloques de hielo, otros seres son como océanos, otros seres son como ríos, etc. Ahora, en las 37 prácticas de los bodhisattvas, dice, todo el sufrimiento surge por el apego al yo. Siempre el pensamiento del yo aparece en la mente. Reconocerlo es como reconocer que la naturaleza del hielo es el agua. Cuando llegas a esa realización y reconoces la naturaleza del agua, es como ver la naturaleza de la mente. Así sucede con los 6 reinos, y así se entiende cuando Buda dijo que todos los seres son Budas. Quien tenga esta mente, tiene esta naturaleza. Cuando llegas a realizar la naturaleza de la mente, esto es la budidad. Tenzin Tsumdo, en su tratado más conocido, que es el Gonchi, dijo, la última naturaleza permanece sin ser cambiada. Temporalmente se le dan muchos nombres. Ahora, regresamos al principio. El Buda solo enseñó la naturaleza fundamental de todas las cosas. Cuando el Buda se iluminó, expresó la naturaleza de la mente. La naturaleza de la mente es profunda, luminosa y clara, libre de elaboración. Es profunda y pacífica. La naturaleza de la mente es pacífica como el espacio, o como el océano, o como el cielo. Cuando ves así la naturaleza de la mente, es cuando alcanzas la iluminación. Entonces, hoy hablaré brevemente acerca del Shamata.
저봐 사막을 송겨되는 오따리 당한 내lok도리 당한 렉도 선질로 사실 내랑 생각되는 바본 거래 그리 때는 통 내록 기바데 다른 것들이 따와 탐지 내록도는 쳤다 그래 덕거래지 내록들을 락심 찍고 들었다고 그래 사지 심지니 이거만 락심 내록도 하고는 파사지 심지 하고 타고 그래
So it's important. It's important that we really see the importance of realizing the nature of the mind. There's nothing more important, and that's why you should think about the benefits of realizing the nature of the mind and the shortcomings of not realizing the nature of the mind. And that's because everybody wants to be happy. There's no one who doesn't want to be happy. And that's because we have a mind. Everyone with a mind wants to be happy and does not want to suffer. And so that's why when we train in the graduated path, we begin with the recognition of suffering. The Buddha said, first you must understand, recognize suffering. And then we train in the 4 thoughts that turn the mind and so on. So first we must recognize our own suffering. So for example, in this world, humans and animals live together. But what's the difference? The difference arises due to karma. We appear differently because of karma. And who has created karma? The mind has created karma. And the mind creates karma when you follow your thoughts and afflictive emotions. And so that is when the mind follows the karmic winds. And so that is when then one's intelligence becomes afflicted. That is when one follows the karmic winds. And then there is the wisdom winds. And that is when you realize the nature of the mind. Then all these karmic winds, your wind energies all transform into wisdom winds. And in that state, there is no duality between self and other. And so therefore, the wisdom wind possesses freedom. And the karmic winds not. You follow, you're pulled by these karmic winds. And so now, when you follow your afflictive emotions, that is when you're carried away by karmic winds. And so regarding that, Shikten Sumgön had said, cause and effect is the natural manifestation of one's moment-to-moment thoughts. So when just ordinary, unrestrained reflections arise in the mind, and we act on them, this karma will ripen. And it ripens in the manifold appearance of the limitless sentient beings in the 6 realms of samsara. For example, the humans and the animals living together. And so when you look at those animals, for example, their mind, and you look at your own mind, the mind is one and the same. They all want to be happy, and they do not want to suffer. Everyone has the very same wish. There's no difference. But the difference in our appearance is also created by the mind. It is because the mind has become controlled by afflictive emotions, and therefore is controlled by the karmic winds. So it's important that you understand the difference between the karmic winds and the wisdom winds. Because then if you are controlled by the karmic winds, then also later in the bardo, after you have died, it is these karmic winds that will bring you to birth anywhere in the 6 realms of samsara. And you have no freedom as to where to go if you are taken by karmic winds. Now, for example, if a person gets really angry and they possess the wisdom winds, they get angry, but they instantly recognize, oh, this is anger. And then the anger becomes the mirror-like wisdom, because then all there is crystal clarity in the mind. So that's the quality of realizing the nature of the mind. Because then you can transform the 5 poisons, the afflictions, into wisdom. When you do not realize the nature of the mind, you will become controlled by the afflictive emotions. And as a result of that, you will be taken by the karmic winds to take birth anywhere in the 6 realms of samsara. So cause and effect is the natural manifestation of the moment-to-moment thoughts. And this is how it then manifests also in the bardo. So if you do not want to suffer, you have to realize the nature of the mind. Also, the omniscient Longchen Rabcham had said in the Mengatsu, the Treasury of Pith Instructions, he said when you realize the nature of the mind, there is no higher learning than that. And so this is really what we train in, whether we follow the Sakya, Gelugpa, Kagyu, and Nyingma lineage. All the stages of the path are for the sake of that, or for example, practicing 13 years in retreat and so on. Whatever path you go, it is in order to realize the nature of the mind. It's all for that sake. And it is just that sometimes it is misunderstood, or it is kind of this view is not seen. And then we make divisions between I am Mahamudra, I'm a Mahamudra practitioner, and he's a Dzogchen practitioner. And now what he's saying is contradictory and so on. And so then pride arises in the mind. And pride arises because one has not realized the nature of the mind. So actually what we need to see is that all of these teachings, whether it's Mahamudra, Dzogchen, or any other teaching, they all say the same thing, and they all are for the purpose of realizing the nature of the mind. And so then you can just think of it in very simple terms and think that it's enough if I just realize the nature of the mind. And if you decide upon that, then through this certainty, you will realize the nature of the mind. And so the view is all the different views need to be brought into one single essence. That's important. And so that essence is the need to realize the nature of the mind. And that is all you need to do. All you need to do is realize the nature of the mind. And once you realize the nature of the mind, you will understand, then you will really understand how Buddhas and sentient beings are actually non-dual. So when you realize the nature of the mind, then you don't have to look outward and try to see how they are Buddhas, but when you realize the nature of your own mind, you will naturally understand how all sentient beings are also Buddhas.
산적생 나반 이인이들이 강 가르쳐가는데 동당 산적생 가르쳐버려서
Es muy importante que veamos la importancia de realizar la naturaleza de la mente. Todos quieren ser felices. No hay nadie que no quiera ser feliz. Cuando entrenamos en el camino gradual, primero reconocemos el sufrimiento. Después, seguimos con los 4 pensamientos que tornan la mente al Dharma. Y así subsecuentemente. Ahora, un ejemplo muy claro son los animales y los humanos, que vivimos juntos en el mismo plano, en el mismo planeta. Estos estados diferentes, animales o humanos, se dan gracias al karma. Cuando la mente sigue los vientos kármicos, entonces es cuando nuestra inteligencia se ve afectada. Cuando los vientos de sabiduría son los que seguimos, entonces no hay dualidad entre uno y los otros. Entonces, cuando las aflicciones surgen en la mente y actuamos de acuerdo, se manifiesta el karma y se manifiestan entonces los 6 reinos del samsara. Cuando ves a los animales, su mente y nuestra mente, todos queremos ser felices y ninguno quiere sufrir, pero nuestra apariencia también es afectada por el karma y por los vientos kármicos. Es importante reconocer la diferencia entre los vientos kármicos y los vientos de sabiduría. Los vientos kármicos son los que nos llevan a los 6 reinos. Por ejemplo, si uno se enoja y lo reconoce, entonces esto se vuelve la sabiduría cual espejo. Entonces, el reconocer la naturaleza de la mente es de vital importancia. Así es como vamos a transformar las 5 aflicciones en las 5 sabidurías. Así se manifiesta en el Dharma. Si no quieres sufrir, entonces tienes que realizar la naturaleza de la mente. Cuando realices la naturaleza de la mente, no hay enseñanza más alta que esta. Cualquier camino que sigas, al final es para realizar la naturaleza de la mente. Entonces no importa que sigas una escuela, otra escuela, que estudies Soche, Mahamudra, al final el sentido de todas estas, la meta última es la realización de la naturaleza de la mente. Cuando el orgullo nace en la mente, es que no hemos realizado la naturaleza de la mente. Todas las enseñanzas dicen lo mismo.
So you might immediately feel that, oh, it's the ultimate bodhicitta. That's most important. And yes, on the one hand, that's true, but then also you have to look at your own personal experience, where you are on the path. And from that perspective, the relative bodhicitta is a little bit more important, actually. And so how do we practice it now in relation to shamatha, or calm abiding? So shamatha, or calm abiding, is still a tranquil meditative state, and in the beginning, most people, no one is really able to instantly stay in this state of calm. There are a few people who are able to do that instantly, and that is due to their past karmas. But even then, even if you're able to stay in a state of shamatha, then when we again rise from the meditation and go into our daily activities, again, these ordinary unrestrained thoughts and afflictions arise in the mind. And so that is because the shamatha that you have cultivated is not founded in the relative bodhicitta. And so it is actually necessary to, before you practice shamatha, that you cultivate a firm basis of immeasurable love, which is the relative bodhicitta. And if you have developed immeasurable love, actually that the nature of that itself is shamatha. Because then, when there is immeasurable love, no ordinary unrestrained thoughts will arise. So therefore it is better to develop shamatha together with or on the basis of an altruistic mind or immeasurable love. Also, Thigden Sumgön had said that when thoughts arise, then you cultivate love, then it becomes an accumulation of merit. And when nothing arises, when things arise, it's like that, and when nothing arises, then you rest in the unborn, unarisen state of primordial wisdom. And in this way, the two, merit and wisdom, become unified. And so or we can also say that this is the union of wisdom and compassion. So this is how they become unified. And so when thoughts arise, so when you're in your activities, you cultivate immeasurable love, you cultivate bodhicitta. And then when that has become firmly established, then when nothing arises, which is when you meditate, you will actually be able to just rest naturally in a meditative state. And naturally all the coarse thoughts and afflictive emotions will be pacified. So that depends on altruism. When altruism has arisen, the mind will naturally be still or in a calm state. So that is the relative bodhicitta. And shamatha should be founded first on the relative bodhicitta. And then shamatha will become stable. So the relative bodhicitta is the immeasurable love that you sustain on an ongoing basis. Before you engage in meditation practice, in all your activities, you cultivate immeasurable love. And that is, you see everything, even just things, objects, everything is pervaded by your love, everything at all. And then when you, on the basis of that, when you meditate, the mind will instantly be in a tranquil state. And that is because of immeasurable love, all-pervasive love. So this is how you should meditate on shamatha in the beginning. And so also on the basis of this, when you cultivate immeasurable love, it is also on the basis of that you can then understand that actually all sentient beings have that nature, the nature of mind. And they only are temporarily obscured by self-grasping and the afflictive emotions and controlled by karma. So also through having love as a basis, you will even realize that. And then you will also realize that actually, ultimately, none of these sentient beings possesses any true existence. And you realize that our basis, the ground, is one and the same. The mind of all the Buddhas, your own mind, and of all sentient beings. So you realize that on the basis of such calm, which is founded in immeasurable love or the relative bodhicitta. So in brief, if you practice shamatha meditation on the basis of immeasurable love, then your practice will become stable.
Ahora, aquí es muy importante el realizar nuestra práctica personal, el evaluar en qué parte del camino estamos, cómo practicamos la bodhicitta en relación al shamatha. Al principio, nadie es capaz de permanecer en el estado de calma. Solo algunos pocos, debido a sus karmas de vidas pasadas, es cuando logran a lo mejor morar sin ninguna práctica. El shamatha que has cultivado, si no está basado en la bodhicitta relativa, entonces es difícil de mantener. Entonces, antes de practicar shamatha, se debe de practicar y generar el amor inmensurable. Es mejor desarrollar el shamatha junto de la base de la bodhicitta. Por eso cuando surgen los pensamientos, surgen pensamientos de amor bondadoso, si primero se desarrolló la bodhicitta. Así el mérito y la sabiduría se unifican. La sabiduría y la compasión se unifican. Si se cultiva la bodhicitta, entonces después puedes descansar en el estado meditativo y todos los pensamientos se calmarán. Entonces, lo que yo recomiendo es que el shamatha debe de fundarse en la bodhicitta relativa. El amor inmensurable que se cultiva en todas las actividades. Cuando hagas esto, verás que todo es permeado por tu amor, inclusive los objetos. Es en base a esto que cuando medites, tu mente estará en un estado tranquilo. Así debes de meditar en shamatha. Es por ese entrenamiento que veremos que todos los seres tenemos la misma naturaleza búdica y realizaremos que ningún ser tiene una existencia intrínseca. La mente de nosotros y de todos los seres es igual. Nuestra mente y la mente de los Budas también es igual. En breve, si practicas Shamatha, esto en la base de la Bodhichitta, tu práctica será estable.
야, 남또 샤양 될 주도메가 주도메가 제들이 오 로빈 남고 조서레스 베레 장도 따고는 바람이 없거든. 오 바람 잡수 조서레 잡수를 하는 건데 쇼서 대타로는 생은 남도 생 권한에서 말해 생 권한에서 말 대랑 니지 줄오 다다는 생은 남고 내 사고도 나지 니지들 되는 이제 레사 그래 레디야 이마다 그래스 대도 하고서 들이 짜다라는 생은 랑그 생은 드신다는 것 같아요. 랑그 남또 좋을 마저를 셔도 성교리 확통도 좋을 거리 락도 세부 내록도 또 설마 들리베라 짜줘 봤다가 들이 세부 시합게 들이 무고도 집이 봐도 깨도 뒤용디데 대다 하고 뭐들이 대다 남도라고 차와 샤로 대단지 람지인게 그것들이 딱또 동나 그가 람지인 소교수 랑차랑도 벨레 차를 뭐지 대다고 정지 들이 좋다들이 나또 탐지에서 잡아 들이 세랑 시설들이 대다 내 터동을 대들이 다시리 들이 다시리 다들이 얼마만 무슨 거요지 대들은 돈이 이제 선랑세 발라 사람들 마음대로 sembrano mano battere sette sardo 노래들이 시합체를 놓으요래 벨 잡도 쳔볼 용만 매 쳐서 담들 잡지 잡고 속자답도 통통고요래 잡도 가시더니 용마지 저는 잡도 저 총총적이라더니 같은 통통고요 대회다다 공철이고 뭐가 세고 벨 똑같이 뭐 도제가 걸려 샘맞기나 살 초반으로 당저 또 맨날 저 용마지 저 동배가 야랑 저리야로 때는 어디 용마지 당거리대 쌀고로 똑똑해서야 여기 코랑기 야야 나는 도래서 대답을 오 대비야 대냐면은 남도라서 지나지 저도 받다서는 남발부터 봐서 남발부터 봐 남도 따를 매번 말이 셔야 될 주도 마셔라 주도 마셔야 실로랑 속말로 남도 상기 총기기 시바 대게 성격이 시바 되게 대 나도 마찬가지로 나는 라지메 봐도 그랬다 나와 탐절한 것인데 센터 나도 자사 차렸다지 senza 나갔다 차서 뒤강이더니 라게 세고 첫 랍을 하고는 들이대리 좀 매 봐들이 라지 자녀 torture 들이 지리지 다 상성들 들이 sem내로 랑 차탑 내가 돼서 네트봐 내리 마세들은 남도 촬영되게 네 밤에라 대차들이 세분대로 랑시되고 내서 이제 밤에 봐도 실랑 총마 좋아서 들이대 가세 되나 촬영 네 밤에와 들이랑 촬영 좋아서 나도 촬영 네 밤에와 참을 깝들이지 다 세분대로 네대 싹동시고 쌀람지 세는 남도 요매 하고 요래 똥들이 강차와들 파야자 참아 맞아버리 이 따라서 하고는 들이 다들이 다시네 들이 세비는 뒤다 하고 들이 유는 거는 제너들이 방식에서 들이 실내지 연대도 거는 들이 다들 셈싸워 대라더니 랑통성 딱그래 랑통시 말거리더니 제 마통의 세문에랑 니 통도 마통도 그 생물에 비해 싸워 뛰고 침모 오 저도 사자 집어서 문이 오에 나가다 가서 잡대요 봐 별라고 별로 탐지 잡대요 봐 가서 가라 그래서 나와서 이제 나게까지 잡대요 봐 선지 라지 제 냠뇽데 가리 들이 sem나 쉽게 뭐래 대체로들이 공부한 명당 제가 진짜 말아봐야 너또 죽을 틈바라 라고 공부하면서 어떤 이들 명령도 제가 공통기 명령을 때문에 라고 명령 무슨 소바티 다음 무슨 때문에 세미 명령을 또 오래 들랑 사람을 죽은 거요래 저것들이 고아sam들이 고아지 야전들이 고아들 빈시다 통을 남수 용요래 몰라리 besong책대 하장 개체벌 고바 명령단 제가들 고바 고아단 제가 소매 다 등상 삼아 고아거들 고성도 하고서 사람을 시에고로 땅에 참아시에 토고요 어디 철권이랑 그냥 미시라 이쪽들한테 내 소용 말해 배라 라고 남도 뭐라 니가 이왕도 소를 거래 그때 소를 쏠 때는 개바탕 치고라는 딱 되나 우리 맞대로 차도 라고 명령은 되고 나오서는 들이대 대다가 싸먹다가 들이대 원만 명령단 제가 아주 신에게 명령이 가리 당부 나도라 찰라라 rolando 들이 나도들랑 그 세고 쌓이마 대념령 니발을 파주도 땅을 뒤지는 천도요 봐 나는 네 레도 차지네 들이 차들이 시를 천도야 대시합을 뭐 생성사나 들이 세트 대지서 마저 왔더니 같이 천나 놓고 맨날 대타버도 대념용도 없다 또 뺀 잠시나는 자동제거 탐지 대타버리 대타버 념용데 잠시나는 자동만 탐지 철랬더니 바람만 가서 놓고도 나 배자도 나 잡소는 로사님이 제일로 최 바람들 뭐는 잡 대처에서 세막하고 짜장 맞이만 탐지 대로 차대요래 라상 꼼장이 몸이 되던데 답변을 제일로들이 바람때 자들이 정말 제들이 고쳐놓은 탑도 그래 짠 자성을 탑자다는 적들이 그별로 짠 자마테라 배들 세주자들은 낭세고 나와사지와 낭세고 짠장고 그래 세고 짠장고 세고 짠장사 가래야 뉴먼바래지 다들들 상통고 따와라 톡성디 상통 따와도 뉴먼바로 짠장고 그래 근데 신내자 상론이 송대했어 상통고 따와 오늘들이 신내는 이런 뭐 너도 쫄람 탐치를 시네 차송으로 때로 차거는 좀살 가서 곰매 봐서 곰도 먹고 치발 매봐 이 마차가 버렸더니 시에다 상송수를 시리 가리리 나도 탐치다 잡을 센터레스 어때 하고니 상송 가리리 지금은 나도 찌마 신이 대라도레스 식시 시바테 시바 제용나 들이들이 랑랑 톡톡도 님뭐 레사다 말 레사 하면도 나도랑 차랑 도레 야잖아 라버토상 라버토고 좀 마토버 좀 뒤에다 레지 뒤냠 농데 하고는 돼서 야보여 사레지
And the relative regarding the relative bodhicitta. So now we can see in this world, for example, the nature of now happiness and suffering. When we just look around at people's situation in the world, so right now nowadays there's so much suffering in the world, and even though there's so much suffering, there are still some people who do not suffer at all. For example, they're healthy in their bodies and they experience no mental suffering. There's many people like that. Some people are very happy. Or, for example, on the other hand, for example, a country might experience great well-being, but still, even though the country is generally in a state of happiness and well-being, there are people in a country who experience a lot of suffering. And that is all because of their individual karma. So that's why not everyone's experience of things is the same. And even though we all have a precious human body, the experience is not the same. So that is why Thigten Songkhen said, cause and effect is the natural manifestation of the moment-to-moment thoughts. So now we are speaking from the relative perspective, the relative bodhicitta. So the relative bodhicitta means that we need to cultivate immeasurable love. If immeasurable love arises in your mind, then no ordinary, coarse afflictive emotions will arise just naturally. That is the result of the relative bodhicitta. And so as a result, one experiences happiness, the temporary happiness of the gods and the human states. And for example, it is said, if you practice a Nyingna retreat a single time, you create the cause for a precious human body. So as a result, suffering is temporarily pacified. But ultimately also it becomes the cause for attaining Buddhahood. And so how is that? It is because when you cultivate love, then like the Buddha, for example, and the Buddha only cultivated love, and in this way, the self-grasping became weaker and weaker. It diminished more and more. It's just like a snow mountain, a glacier, the ice melting all into water. And in the end, all that water then has merged with the vast ocean. And that's when the Buddha had realized the ultimate truth. But for that, it is important that one first recognizes the relative level, that one cultivates relative bodhicitta, that you understand the qualities of immeasurable love. Because if you understand immeasurable love, you will really consider karma very carefully. Also, when immeasurable love arises within you, you will naturally understand past and future lives and karma, and such a person will have their own law. They won't require any other law. They will naturally keep all the laws on their own. They will refrain from all negative action. That's why Milarepa also said, then the 10 virtuous actions arise naturally, and the 10 non-virtuous actions settle in their natural state, dissolve on their own. That is the quality of the relative bodhicitta. That's the nature of immeasurable love. And also that's related now to the Shamatha practice when we engage in meditation practice. So the meditation practice must be founded in the relative bodhicitta. And if it is founded in relative bodhicitta, it leads to a stability that allows you to always be able to stay in the natural state of the mind. It gives you this state of calm that allows you to stay in the natural state. When Milarepa taught meditation to his disciple Bardabum, he said to her, first practice Shamatha. When you practice Shamatha, calm abiding, meditate on your mind like the sky. And the mind is not different from space. And so then she practiced, and she looked at her mind like the sky, and then she reported back and said, however, when I rest within the sky, I am feeling well, but then clouds begin to arise, and that unsettles me. And so Milarepa then replied, let it all be. When you are well, when you feel well, when you rest in space, continue to rest in space. When clouds arise in the sky, see them as the magical display of space itself, not separate from space, and just rest in space. Clouds not being separate from space. And in this way, there is no more difference between conceptuality and non-conceptuality. If you just let whatever arises be. And when you realize that, when you're able to rest within such a state, you realize that mind is like space. And when you realize that mind is like space, then Milarepa said, you have then actualized the Dharmakaya, you have realized the Dharmakaya. And so when thoughts arise within the mind, sometimes very subtle thoughts of hope and fear and so on, if you follow these thoughts, those subtle thoughts of hope and fear, you will accumulate karma. Because if you follow these thoughts, you will cling to the true existence of your fears. And then karma will be created. So thoughts can arise, but don't be bothered by them. Don't cling to them. Just see them like a cloud appearing in the sky, not being separate from the sky. Or, and Milarepa also said to Bardabum, meditate on your mind like an ocean. And when the waves appear on the ocean, see the waves as the magical display of the ocean and not separate. And when waves appear, rest in the ocean. So when you recognize this, you see that all the thoughts arise from the mind itself. So just like the clouds arise from the sky itself. It is just when you begin to cling, when you see things in a dualistic way, and you think that, oh, there's this thought that arises, and you believe in this thought, because first of all, you believe in that reality of self and other. Then you follow that thought. That is when you create karma. And of course, in the end, that karma is also illusory. So in any case, it all depends on how you see things in your own mind. That determines whether or not you will liberate the thoughts arising in the mind. And so that is what happens when we come to Vipassana, or special insight. That is when the thoughts are liberated upon arising. That is when you actually have realized the nature of the mind. And that is, it possesses a sharpness which is like metal, like iron, cutting iron, like metal cutting metal. The mind, your wisdom is so sharp that it can cut through any concept of grasping at a concrete reality or any concept structure in your mind, even the most subtle thought that arises. So don't analyze whatever arises, and then it will just go away. Things arise on their own, and they are liberated on their own. And so this is how you meditate, like the mind being like water or like space. And in the end, when you habituate to that, the mind will become non-conceptual or free from any thoughts. So that is when you are able to sustain such a state. And the sustaining is the state of calm. So first, when you practice shamatha, you train the mind in abiding still without thinking. And then there are many levels to shamatha practice too. But all these levels, actually, Milarepa also said that all these levels of bhumis and the paths and so on are nothing but the increasing clarity of emptiness, one's realization of emptiness. So one's seeing of the true nature of mind becomes more and more clear. Wisdom becomes more and more clear. It's just like the mud in the water settles. And then once the mud has settled, you can see all the animals in the ocean. You can see the bottom of the ocean. Now, sometimes when you have a body of water that is very muddy, even if it's just a small body of water, if it's really muddy, you cannot see anything. You can't see the surface or the bottom or anything in there. So that's actually how one is introduced to the practice of calm, abiding, of meditation in the Dzogchen tradition, where it says you should just allow the mind to settle in an uncontrived, unaltered state. It is just like allowing the mud in water to settle on its own. So if you just stay still, then the mud will naturally settle. And then when you look at that cup of water, it is completely clear. So if you want to clear the mud, then you must not analyze whatever arises, follow whatever arises. Just rest naturally, in the natural state. So in the Dzogchen path, one takes this as an example for one's meditative stabilization. And so then when you gain the experience in practicing, whatever thought arises, don't cling to it. So when we speak about achieving a state of non-conceptuality, that does not actually mean having no thoughts. But non-conceptuality means that even though thoughts arise, you do not follow them. You do not pursue any of those thoughts, but you just let them be. So thoughts do arise in a non-conceptual mind, but there is an awareness that recognizes them, that feels these thoughts. And then that awareness does not become controlled by that thought. And then the thought will diminish on its own. As it is said in the 37 practices, appearances are one's own mind. Everything is your own mind. The object that arises and the object at the place from which it arises and the one who perceives the object, it is all one and the same, like space or like a vast ocean. And when you realize that, you see that thoughts are not separate from mind. They are just like waves on water. And when you see that, you will become fearless. Because you have gained the experience that if you simply let it be, whatever arises will become liberated on its own without you having to do anything to it, without altering that state in any way. And then you habituate to that until you are able to sustain such a state of calm that sees, which is the Vipassana, especially insight, for any given period of time. And not only are you able to stay within that state, even if thoughts and afflictions arise, they will not harm you in any way. They will not move you from the natural state. So it is said, do not lose the stability of clear awareness. So nothing else is actually needed. Just remain unwaveringly from clear awareness. Then even if thoughts arise, they will not harm you in any way, affect you in any way. And in this way, they become naturally liberated on their own. So at that time, when you rest within the natural state of the mind, you experience the state that we call clarity and emptiness. And clarity means that you know, the awareness knows whether or not thoughts are present. That's the clarity. And then emptiness is that you simply let be whatever arises. Whatever arises, you don't grasp at it, but you recognize its lack of inherent existence. So this understanding, this realization comes from the quality of first having developed shamatha or calm abiding. So when you realize it in this way, you have gained your first or some understanding. And then you continue to sustain it so it becomes longer and longer. So first you practice shamatha, and then you practice that over and over again until you gain stability. And then you practice vipassana, which is the clarity of the mind. And so vipassana, or especially insight, is also explained as seeing what you have not seen before. You are seeing the true nature of the mind as it is, but you haven't seen it before. So that is when you gain certainty in the actual nature of the mind. For example, the instructions on Mahamudra that you have received, that's when you realize this is really what is meant with the mind is all pervasive, just like space. It pervades everything. For example, it pervades my body and everything on the outside, the outer world. Second. And so in this way, as you continue to practice and gain an experience, it is through the experience that slowly a certainty will arise. Milarepa also had said that meditation must be imbued with experience. And then he said, isn't there a disciple who possesses such uncontrived experience? So all meditation must become an actual experience, be imbued with experience. And only then you will gain complete certainty in your realization yourself. And until then, you rely on words and mere understandings, and mere understandings or words that are not founded on an actual experience will not benefit you a lot. So these words by Milarepa are extremely important. The meditation has to become an actual experience. Because when it comes to knowledge, we all know things. We can speak very eloquently about the different bhumis and the paths. We can list them all and can speak about all of it. We understand all of it. But then the moment you're actually looking inward and you're trying to meditate, You can't stay still for just a second, for just a moment, and you're constantly tossed around by ordinary, unrestrained thoughts and afflictive emotions. And then you begin to analyze them, and you think that this is, it's this and it's that and so on. And in this way, you're not actually having a meditative experience. And so that's why Milarepa said meditation practice must be imbued with experience. So this is how you should practice shamatha first. So the experience gained in the shamatha practice is that first, when you look at your mind, thoughts arise in the mind, and the first experience that you gain is how the thoughts that arise are liberated naturally, meaning that they dissolve on their own. That's the first experience. And then the next experience that you gain is that how you are training, that the thoughts that arise and the afflictive emotions actually are like a training. And it's through the thoughts that you are training the mind in awareness, in clarity. So it is just if you do not become controlled by them. If you follow those thoughts, then they do not become training, but then they lead to confusion. And then you continue to think of me and I and so forth. And it starts with very subtle thoughts of hope and fear. And then you follow these thoughts and you become confused. And then they become very intensive thoughts. But then on the other hand, if you seize these thoughts, these subtle thoughts with awareness, you will not follow them. And then no matter how many arise, you will not become controlled by delusion. And then they will not affect you in one or the other way. And that's the next experience that you will then gain through stability. So it is just like I mentioned before, like the ocean, water, and the sky, and so on. And so for example, when you're, like another example, a personal example about the water and the ocean water, so the stability that you gain, or the experience that you gain here through the meditation, is similar to going surfing in the ocean. And in the beginning, you can't stay above the waves, but once you have gained some training, once you have trained, then you will be very skilled in riding the waves on the surfboard. I, for example, I'm not like that. So, for example, one time we were on the beach, and I went into the water, and I was swallowed up by a wave, and I came out with a mouthful of sand. This is not the way to do it. To just run in and then come out with a mouthful of sand, which is just like saying, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to eliminate all the afflictive emotions and so on, being a little bit overly confident. You have to gain the experience in order to have the confidence of riding the waves of the ocean or eliminating the waves of the afflictive emotions. And only when you gain the experience, then you will become fearless. And without any fear, you can just go into the ocean and ride the waves. So this is how we train in a sport physically. And in a similar way, we are also training our mind. So in Buddhism, we are training the mind. And so how are we training the mind? Through the afflictive emotions. And when, especially from the perspective of realizing the view of Vipassana, in order to realize the view of Vipassana, we must train in awareness through utilizing the afflictive emotions. They become our training. And then finally, as a result, Shamatha and Vipassana become unified. So the view of Vipassana is founded on the stability of Shamatha. And it is through Shamatha then that you will be able to sustain the state of calm in all your activities. So all your day-to-day activities all become Shamatha, all become a state of calm abiding. And then there is no more difference between meditation and non-meditation. All becomes meditation. But until that, you must habituate training to unify Shamatha and Vipassana. So again, what is Shamatha? It is the thought-free mind. And then what is Vipassana? It is the awareness that knows whether or not a thought arises. It's the clarity. It's the clear awareness that recognizes. That's Vipassana, a special insight. And so this awareness, this clear awareness, must gain stability. And gaining stability, it will not become controlled by afflictive emotions, and as a result, you will not accumulate karma. And then in the end, thoughts arise, but are naturally liberated. So the arising of thoughts and their diminishing happen simultaneously if you just let the thoughts be without grasping at them. And so, therefore, it's important that you reflect on that, thinking about what's the benefits of having such a state of calm, and what's the shortcomings coming from not having it, not having this experience. So therefore, I feel it's very important that you gain an actual experience.
La práctica de la meditación se debe de fundamentar en la bodhichitta relativa y te da un estado de calma que te permite morar en esta calma mental. Medita en tu mente como el cielo. Tu mente es como el espacio. Cuando descansas en la mente como el espacio, entonces hay veces que surgen las nubes y te perturban. Déjalo ser. Cuando surgen nubes, velas como el despliegue mágico del espacio. Las nubes no son separadas del espacio. Así no hay diferencia entre los conceptos. Cuando puedas descansar en este estado, realiza que la mente es como el espacio. Entonces actualizarás el Dharmakaya. Cuando surgen pensamientos sutiles y los sigues, empiezas a acumular karma. Si sigues esos pensamientos, te aferras a la existencia de un yo y de otros. Entonces ve a estos pensamientos como una nube que aparece en el cielo. Milarepa dijo, medita como si tu mente fuera como un océano. Si aparecen las olas, medita en la calma del océano. Cuando ves las cosas de manera dualista y crees en los pensamientos porque crees en la realidad de uno y de otros, empiezas a crear el karma. Al final, este karma también es ilusorio. Esto es cuando llegas al Vipassana, cuando realizas la naturaleza de la mente y entonces la mente tiene un filo como el del metal que corta al metal. Tu mente es tan afilada que tu mente puede cortar cualquier realidad. No analices lo que sucede y entonces serás liberado. Así, medita en tu mente como el espacio o como el agua y se volverá no conceptual y libre de pensamientos. Cuando practicas Shamata, entrenas la mente en permanecer estable. Hay muchos niveles, bhumis y diferentes etapas del camino. Pero todas estas etapas de la realización son etapas de la realización de la vacuidad. La sabiduría se va volviendo cada vez más clara. Es como el agua turbia cuando se llega a sentar. Cuando un cuerpo de agua tiene mucho lodo, no se puede ver. Pero si se le deja reposar, entonces se asienta el lodo y se vuelve clara el agua. Así es la introducción al Dzogchen. Dice, deja la mente permanecer en calma y asentarse, y el lodo se va a asentar. Si quieres limpiar el lodo, no debes de analizar ni seguir todo lo que surja. En Dzogchen, esto es el ejemplo de la estabilidad meditativa. Cualquier pensamiento que surja, no te apegues. No significa esto que no tengas pensamientos. Quiere decir que aunque surjan los pensamientos, no se les persigue. No hay conceptualidad. Esta conciencia no es controlada por los pensamientos. Las apariencias son nuestra propia mente. El objeto, el lugar de donde surge y a donde van, es lo mismo. Los pensamientos son como olas en el agua. Cuando realizas esto, entonces pierdes el temor. Sin alterar este estado, te habitúas hasta que lo mantienes por un tiempo y además permaneces en este estado. Si surgen aflicciones, entonces no te van a afectar. No pierdas la estabilidad de la atención clara. No te alejes de la atención clara. Así los pensamientos se liberan por sí solos. El estado de claridad y vacío. Claridad es si la atención sabe que los pensamientos están o no presentes. El vacío o la vacuidad es reconocer que no tienen una realidad intrínseca. Primero practicas el shamatha hasta ganar estabilidad. Después practicas el vipassana, que es la claridad de la mente. Ver lo que no has visto antes, la naturaleza de la mente. Las instrucciones de Mahamudra dicen que la mente permea todo, como el espacio. De esta manera, como sigues practicando a través de la experiencia, surge la seguridad.
Shamatha, so what is shamatha? So the shamatha is the state where the mind is able to abide calmly in the natural state. And so then when you stay in a tranquil state, there is heedfulness or conscientiousness. It is said that heedfulness is the basis of all good qualities, and that also arises from shamatha practice. In the 37 Bodhisattva practices, it says in brief, in whatever you do, look at the state of your mind. So in your practice, the shamatha practice must become combined with mindful awareness. So first, if you're mindful, mindfulness leads to heedfulness or conscientiousness, and heedfulness is the actual state of shamatha then. The heedful conscientious state is the state of shamatha. And then within that state, whatever thought and afflictive emotion arise, they arise on their own and are naturally liberated, and you will not become controlled by them. That is what we then call the union of shamatha and vipassana. So shamatha and vipassana are not separate. And how are they not separate? How are they one? So in the context of shamatha, first the muddiness of the mind is cleared away. The mind calms down, thoughts are pacified, and you come to the natural state where a wisdom, a clear awareness reveals itself, and that is vipassana, special insight. And we have said it is like this vast ocean. A sign is that the experience becomes like this vast ocean or the sky. Now, for example, one time in our homeland, there was some lamas who practiced with great diligence. They practiced some shamatha, kind of on the hills in the countryside. And now when you practice shamatha, it is also said that you develop certain clairvoyant abilities. For example, you're in one place, and then you're able to see something an object or so that's at a different place and so on. So it just appears in your mind. But then, they practice there. So these masters, they practice there. And so then one developed some doubt about the other. And so then he asked that we're both kind of testing each other. And then one asked the other, so up there on that mountain, is there any cattle? Is there any animal up there? And so then he saw it, the other meditator, and he said, yes, there is. And so then there really was, actually. So he saw that. And so this is how sometimes one is able to see certain things that are not right in front of one as a result of shamatha, of calm abiding, when the mind is very still. But then still, certain doubts may arise within the mind. And so the reason why one is able to see is because in that state, the mind is pervasive, all pervasive. And the more you meditate, the more you habituate, the more clear your mind will become, the more clear the seeing will become. And then there will be less doubts and more clarity as to what you are seeing with the all-pervasive mind. And so what is it actually? How is it actually that the mind pervades, is all-pervasive? It is through immeasurable love, and that's why immeasurable love is the basis of practicing shamatha. So when you cultivate immeasurable love, you must first bring to mind the suffering of all the limitless sentient beings, their karmic visions and all their suffering. It has to be very clear in your mind so that a real feeling arises in the mind. You really experience their suffering. And then immeasurable compassion arises. When immeasurable compassion arises and you only recite, for example, one Mani mantra, that will naturally pervade all mother sentient beings instantly. It is the immeasurable love and the compassion that actually pervade all sentient beings. And that is why it must be the foundation of Shamatha practice. And that is also why it is due to this all pervasiveness and the stillness of the mind of Shamatha, so the pervasiveness of love and the stillness of Shamatha, that then leads to various clairvoyant abilities. However, you should not meditate with that intention, thinking that I want to meditate so I will gain some clairvoyant abilities, some special powers. So this is not how we should practice. Also, Milarepa had said that, so when he said that when positive signs arise in meditation, do not become overjoyed and arrogant about them. And when negative signs arise, then do not cling to them either. Because the moment you cling, for example, you think that there's this special thing that a clairvoyant power that you had gained, then you think about it and you think that, oh, I really have this special quality. And in that moment, the I has already appeared again, and that will obscure the mind again. The self-grasping is like a demon. And from that, again, then thoughts of attachment and aversion will arise. Also, Majig Labdun had said, when good qualities arise, however great your qualities, do not develop arrogance regarding them. And when negative qualities, so to speak, arise, do not lose heart, do not lose your courage. In brief, do not grasp at anything at all, whether it is positive or negative. Then the mud in the water will just naturally calm down or clear. So the mind will become clear. And so in this way, you should practice shamatha. And so now regarding this clairvoyance that can be developed through shamatha, it is almost like, because the mind is so pervasive, it is like knowing, for example, what's in your own belly. You just know what's there. And that is actually a sign, kind of a mark that indicates an indication of having developed shamatha or calm abiding. So again, Milarepa had said that the practice that we engage, all the practices that we engage in a meditation practice, is increasing clarity. So the bhumis and the paths, progressing on the bhumis and the paths, is nothing but the increasing clarity of one's realization of emptiness. And therefore, a disciple needs indications that indicate that the mind is becoming more and more clear. For example, the clairvoyant powers of seeing where things are like an indication that shows you that the mind is very clear, that you are progressing along the path. But then again, whatever good quality arises, you should not develop pride or arrogance regarding them, but let it all be equal. Just let it all settle in a state of great equanimity. And in this way, whatever arises becomes liberated. Because otherwise, for example, if a positive quality arises and you fixate on it and you do not liberate it, then it will turn into attachment, in a coarse thought. And then if you cling to a negative experience, a negative thought in your mind, then that will turn into a resentment and self-grasping. And so we think that way naturally because the self wants to be happy and it doesn't want to suffer. And that is why once it is in place, there will always be those thoughts of attachment and anger. And the subtle counterparts to attachment and anger are hope and fear. So there is this subtle thought that arises of this is a fearful thought or a hopeful thought. And in this moment already, this I has arisen. This is so nice, and so on. So this needs to become liberated when you through recognizing that it has arisen. And so likewise, so you can think about it in this way: when something good arises and when something bad arises. For example, you have a negative dream, an ill-omened dream that makes you feel upset and sad. Again, that's just a thought, a thought of me that arises. It is a dualistic thought. Whatever arises, whether it is positive or negative, let it all be naturally and don't follow it along. And so then when it all settles down, the mind rests in a clear state of Vipassana, and where you gain, in Vipassana, you gain clarity. So in this way, you should train in Vipassana and Shamatha until you attain these signs, until the signs appear that indicate the progress in the practice. And you reach that state through practicing meditation with great diligence. So these are the qualities that can arise as a result of having practiced Shamatha and Vipassana.
코와 등에게 잠통한들이 좋은 걸로 세고 내록도 오고 세고 내록도 돌아들이 세고 내록도 또그 상지.
Shamata es el estado en que la mente mora en un estado de tranquilidad. Aquí es cuando tienes la conciencia. Es la base de todas las cualidades positivas. Se dice en las 37 prácticas de los Bodhisattvas que permanezcas en tu mente. Primero debes de ser atento, y esto después te lleva a ser consciente. Y esto al final es el estado de Shamatha. En este estado surgen los pensamientos y las aflicciones, pero son liberados y no eres controlados por ellos. El Shamatha y el Vipassana no son separados. Es como el lodo que se asienta. El Vipassana es como la experiencia que se convierte en un océano vasto o como el cielo. Se dice que cuando practicas Shamatha surge la clarividencia. Rinpoche cuenta la historia de un maestro, de dos maestros, los cuales estaban tenían dudas en cuanto al otro. Y entonces le preguntaba uno al otro maestro que si en la montaña de allá enfrente había animales. Y entonces el otro maestro le contestaba seguro que sí había animales, aunque no se podían ver desde ahí. Entonces uno ve estas cosas aunque no se puedan ver físicamente gracias al Shamatha.
The realization of the nature of mind itself is what we call Buddha. When you realize the nature of the mind, you see that what you have not seen before. As we said, I have never seen that my mind is actually Buddha. So that is the life force vein of all practice. That's the heart of all practice. If you want to become liberated from suffering, this is what liberates you from suffering. And if you want to achieve happiness, this is what leads to happiness. And it leads to the unchanging happiness. The great bliss of the Dharmakaya is realized by recognizing the nature of the mind. When you see the nature of the mind, you realize that your natural state itself is the nature of great bliss. Your true nature, the nature of the mind, is the greatly blissful Dharmakaya. And so this, and within that state of blissful Dharmakaya, there is no suffering, there is no thought. So when you have trained in that, you free yourself of suffering, you free yourself of thoughts, of thinking. That is the heart essence of all practice, and that is what we call the union of Shamatha and Vipassana. So again, Shamatha, calm abiding, is the state of heedfulness, and Vipassana, or special insight, is wisdom or clear awareness. It is the awareness that recognizes thoughts arising in the mind. Mindfulness or heedfulness, which is Shamatha, also is applied in all day-to-day activities. So in whatever you do, you are mindful, meaning you are careful. I must be careful, heedful in whatever I do. If you are heedful, you have a state of shamatha or calm abiding. And if you are clear, you have a state of vipassana. And in all your activities, in whatever you do, continuously, you should unify shamatha and vipassana in this way. So I hope that you will practice in this way. So for today, I will stop the teachings here. And there were probably some mistakes in what I said, so I confess that to the scholars. I was just speaking all kinds of things, but I did speak to the best of my abilities. But there probably are a lot of faults in what I said. Anyways, Dharma friends, Tashidelek.
La realización de la mente es el Buda. Si jamás has visto que tu mente es el Buda, entonces tienes que realizarlo.
We'll finish with the yellow prayer book, the long life prayers on page 22.
Bueno, vamos a seguir con las plegarias y ahorita les traduzco esta última parte.
You are the source of all benefit and happiness. Tenzin Gyatso, Lord Chenrezig, may you remain steadfast until the end of samsara. Embodiment of the three jewels, great being who upholds and increases the teachings of the Shakya lion, supreme are your activities of guiding others with your perfect deeds. May you, the precious Guru who accomplishes everything spontaneously, live long. Holder of the teachings of the Lord Drigumpa, great Lord of the three jewels, through the power of your peerless compassion and the holy Dharma's peace and light, you bring relief to beings. May your life be long. The one known in the noble land as Arya Deva emanated into the Gar clan of eastern Tibet as Chodingpa, the heart son of Jigten Khenpo. May the life of the glorious Garchen remain steadfast for 100 eons. Page 28. May the
Página
teaching
28.
Drigumpa Ratna Shri, Master of Interdependence, Omniscient Lord of Dharma, who has seen all knowable things, be upheld until the end of psychic existence through study, practice, hearing, contemplation, and meditation. Your 1,000 arms are the 1,000 wheel-turning kings. Your 1,000 eyes are the 1,000 Buddhas of this fortunate eon. Your love is boundless like space. I supplicate to the Bodhisattva Chenrezig.
Thank you so much, Garchen Rinpoche, for your kind and precious teachings. We wish you long life, good health, and rejoice to all Dharma brothers and sisters. The next segment is at 9:30 a.m. Singapore time. The teachings today will be continued tomorrow at 7 a.m. Do encourage friends and family to participate.
Bueno, antes de continuar con las últimas dos partes de la traducción, aquí se están despidiendo los organizadores y están recordando que las prácticas de acumulación de mantras de la práctica de Amitabha continúan.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
And now we'd like to request all panelists to turn on video and mic to say goodbye in Thai.
Rinpoche long life. Rinpoche long life. Rinpoche long life.
Ok, les acabo de traducir los últimos dos bloques. El penúltimo quedó inconcluso. Rinpoche estaba dando un ejemplo de la clarividencia que se desarrolla a través del Shamata. Si normalmente uno practica el Shamata, va a desarrollar clarividencia de ver cosas que normalmente no se pueden ver. Esto es porque la mente permea todo. Mientras más te habitúas a todo esto, más claridad surgirá. ¿Cómo es que la mente todo permea? Es a través del amor inconmensurable. Entonces, debes de entrenar a la mente en traer a tu mente todo el sufrimiento claro de todos los seres.
Thank you, Garchen.
Goodbye to anyone here. Thank you. Thank you very much for everyone. Thank you.
Ok. A ver, continúo. Estábamos hablando de la clarividencia, y cómo la mente permea todo. Entonces, es a través del amor inconmensurable. Debes de traer a tu mente el sufrimiento de todos los seres. Realmente experimentar su sufrimiento. Y entonces va a surgir la compasión. Y entonces es cuando un solo mani mantra que lo recites, vas a permear a todos los seres. Ahora, no debes de meditar con la intención de volverte clarividente y tener poderes especiales. Milarepa dijo, cuando aparecen los signos positivos, no te pongas feliz ni te aferres a ellos, porque en ese momento piensas que tienes cualidades especiales y entonces surge de nuevo el yo. El apego al yo es como un demonio. Machi Ladrón recomendó que no surja la arrogancia, que no te aferres a nada, ya sea positivo o negativo. Entonces es cuando el lodo en el vaso se asienta. La clarividencia que se puede desarrollar a través del Shamata es como saber qué es lo que tienes en el estómago una vez que comiste. Es como una señal de haber desarrollado el Shamata. Milarepa dijo que el progresar en el camino es la realización de la vacuidad. Es la indicación de que la mente se vuelve más clara y que progresas en el camino. Pero no desarrolles arrogancia o apego. Deja que todo se disuelva en la calma. Si te aferras a un pensamiento negativo, se convertirá en el apego al yo. La esperanza y el miedo sutiles entonces surgen y también surge el yo. Deben de ser liberados a través de reconocer prontamente que surgieron. Si tienes un sueño negativo que te hace sentir mal y triste, es un pensamiento dualista del yo. Lo que surja, déjalo disolverse y la mente descansa en un estado claro de Vipassana. Debes de practicar Shamatha y Vipassana hasta que tengas estas señales. Estas son las cualidades que pueden surgir si practicas. La realización de la mente es el Buda. Si jamás has visto que la mente es el Buda, entonces esto es lo que debes de practicar. Es el corazón de todas las prácticas. Esto es lo que te libera del sufrimiento y te lleva al Dharmakaya. Cuando ves la naturaleza de la mente, esto es el Dharmakaya, en donde no hay sufrimiento y no hay pensamientos. Esto es la unión del Shamatha y Vipassana. Shamatha es el estado de atención y Vipassana es el reconocer los pensamientos y aflicciones que surgen. Ser cuidadoso y atentivo, y entonces tienes el estado de Shamatha. Si tienes claridad, es el estado de Vipassana. Así que espero que practiquen así. Y cierra Garchen Rinpoche diciendo que confiesa los errores que haya tenido, que explicó todo de la mejor forma posible y que pide perdón por cualquier error que tenga. Y mañana otra vez a las 6 de la tarde, hora de México, continuarán estas enseñanzas. Muchas gracias a todos. Buenas noches a todos. Espero verlos mañana. Esto fue una traducción de Grupo de Amigos Drico. Adiós, Alma. Te estoy viendo. Adiós. Bye.